All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a massive question, one that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. Using Herman Bavinck's Christian worldview as our guide, we're asking, how do you know that anything you know is actually real?
Seriously, just take a second to think about that. How do you prove that the world you see, the chair you're sitting on, the screen you're looking at, how do you prove it exists outside of your own thoughts and perceptions? It seems like the most obvious thing in the world, right? But it's actually one of the trickiest problems in all of philosophy.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to define what's known as the thinking and being problem. Then, we'll look at two major philosophies that tried to solve it and, well, didn't quite stick the landing. After that, we'll dig into a completely different kind of solution, a theological one. And finally, we'll see how that foundation tries to pull all of our knowledge together.
Okay, first up, this classic puzzle, the thinking and being problem. It's all about that mysterious gap between what happens inside your head and what's, out there.
Here's the core of it. How can our own subjective thoughts, our thinking, ever be sure they're accurately connecting with objective reality, with being? We all just kind of assume it works. We live our lives as if the world we perceive is the world that truly exists. But what's the guarantee? What is that assumption actually based on?
And this leads to a huge trap. See, if the only thing you can ever be absolutely certain of is your own consciousness, your own thoughts and feelings, well, how do you break out of that? Bavinck calls this the Circassian circle. You're literally trapped inside your own mind. You can't use a thought to prove the existence of something that isn't a thought because your proof is just another thought. It's a perfect circle, a logical dead end.
So you can imagine thinkers have been trying to solve this forever. And for a long time, two major schools of thought really battled it out, each taking a totally different approach to building a bridge between our minds and the world.
So on one side, you've got empiricism. These guys bet everything on the five senses. If you can't see, hear, or touch it, it doesn't count as real knowledge. But as Bavinck points out, this leads to materialism, where abstract ideas like love or justice aren't real things. They're just sounds we make, the breath of a voice. Then you have rationalism, which goes the complete opposite way. It says, don't trust your senses. They can trick you. Trust only pure reason. But the danger there is that you end up trapped in that circle of idealism we just talked about, where your own ideas become the only reality. You see the problem? Bavinck argues that both paths end up breaking that vital connection between our minds and the world.
And here's the kicker. Both of these roads, as different as they seem, lead to the exact same dead end. Whether you throw out the mind in favor of the material world or you throw out the world in favor of the mind, you lose the very idea of truth. You lose that beautiful concept that truth is when our thoughts actually match up with reality. And when that's gone, what's left? Total skepticism.
This brings us to probably one of the most famous and maybe most tired questions ever asked. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said this question from Pontius Pilate, "What is truth?" is the final destination for these philosophies. It's not a real question anymore. It's just a sigh, a shrug. It's what you say when you've given up on finding an answer.
So if materialism and idealism both crash and burn, is that it? Are we just stuck? Well, Bavinck says, what if we've been asking the wrong question? What if we're starting in the wrong place? Instead of starting with the human mind or with the physical world, he proposes a third way, one that starts with God.
And this breaks it down perfectly. It's a three-step solution. First, ante rem, which is just Latin for before the thing. The idea is that before the universe ever existed, it existed as a perfect, complete thought in the mind of God. Step 2, in re, or in the thing. God then creates the world based on that divine thought, literally weaving his logic and reason into the fabric of reality itself. And finally, step 3, in mente, in the mind. Our minds were also created by that same God, and they were specifically designed to be able to recognize and understand the very logic that he put into creation. The bridge between thinking and being wasn't something we had to build. It was already there from the beginning.
This quote just puts it all in a nutshell. It completely flips the problem on its head. The question is no longer, how can my tiny mind possibly grasp this huge external reality? Instead, this view says that reality is graspable. It's knowable, precisely because it was first a known thought in the mind of God.
So what does this actually mean for us? Well, for starters, it means truth is real. It's objective. It exists out there, whether we know it or not. The world is knowable before we ever come along to know it. And that means the job of human reason isn't to create truth, but to discover it, to conform to the reality that's already there. And this, Bavinck argues, is the very foundation that makes science possible in the first place. It's the thrilling process of uncovering the intricate logic God has already built into the universe.
Okay, so for our last section, let's see how this foundation doesn't just apply to philosophy, but how it attempts to unify all the different kinds of knowledge we seek, from science to wisdom, into one big, coherent picture. Bavinck brings up this classic idea from Aristotle, who saw two kinds of knowledge. First, there's science. This is knowing the how. It's understanding the immediate or proximate cause of something. How does an acorn grow into an oak tree? That's science. But then there's wisdom. Wisdom is about the why. It's the search for the ultimate or first cause. Why is there an oak tree at all? Why does anything exist? That's wisdom.
And his point is that we humans are wired to ask both kinds of questions. It's not enough to know how a clock works. We're desperate to know who made the clock and why they made it. Science is amazing and essential, but our minds keep pushing. We have this deep, innate drive for a unified worldview, for wisdom that ties everything together.
Now, Bavinck argues that this deep longing we have for a single, unified truth only makes sense if the universe itself is a single, unified whole. Think about it. If reality were just a random, chaotic jumble of unrelated facts, our search for a theory of everything would be totally pointless, a fool's errand. The fact that we even look for a grand, unified story suggests that maybe we're living inside one.
And this brings us to the final conclusion of the argument. In this worldview, the search for ultimate truth, which is philosophy, and the search for God, which is religion, aren't two separate activities. They are one and the same journey. The lover of wisdom, which is what philosopher means, ultimately discovers that they are a lover of God, because God is the source and substance of all wisdom.
So, we'll leave it there with this question for you. Now, whether you buy Bavinck's argument or not, he forces us to confront a question that every single one of us has to answer, even if we don't realize it. On what do you base your knowledge? What is the ultimate foundation that allows you to trust that your thoughts connect to reality? What is the bedrock of your own worldview?